So very good morning, students. I hope you all are doing good.
Good morning, sir.
So just before I begin with, just have a recap of the last session that we had. So we talked about the natural composting process, उसके pros and cons की बारे में बात कर रहे थे, and we ended up in discussing how to manage the waste and adore, if it is there, how it can be managed. So we have talked about various points that we need to select a site, we need to take care of where the leachate is coming out, where it is happening. So we talked about those factors and what need to be considered in order to have a good composting option. And then I just give a brief introduction about the vermicompost, that why it is a good process. So I've talked about a very basics that vermicompost is also equally good option, not equally, but as more important as far better than the normal composting process. It's a simple biotechnological process. So biotechnological, they say it because it actually utilizes the worms, so for the benefit of mankind, because ultimately the soil will be in a good condition, it will be nourished, and anything that is reaped out of it would be coming in our hands finally. So we need to have those plants raised up in order to have good yield, anything like that. So vermicompost is actually, the vermi means that use of worms in order to have a better compost quality. So that is what I have discussed in the last class. We'll be sharing up the slides with you people, and then we'll continue with the today's part. So we have talked about all these methods, and we have talked about the limitations. We have talked about the management. Okay, here we were. So it is that why do we need to have vermicompost? Is vermicompost a good option with us? It's obviously yes. Vermicompost is always a good option because vermicompost acts upon the solid waste as well. That is not a very good option in case of a normal composting procedures, because it's ultimately the microorganisms that are working in a normal compost process. The things need to be controlled up. The carbon nitrogen ratio needs to be taken in a very appropriate amount. Other factors like aeration, temperature, and many other things, they need to be taken care of. But in case of vermicomposting, it's actually the worms that will be acting upon the waste. So they have more choice. They actually feed upon the different kind of waste. So ultimately, worms, they have a uh, better ability to convert the waste into compost. So that is why. That is why. So ultimately, the thing was that there have been some of the cons which have been associated with the normal composting process, and in comparison, you are actually getting a very good compost, which is actually good in quality, being more nutritious for the soil. The content, they are more rich than a normal compost. Then there is not much to be taken care of. The factors, they have totally been associated. The factors that regulate this mechanism are totally associated with worms only. So we need to actually, worms हैं, जिंदा हैं, खाना खा रहे हैं, क्या उनकी परसेप्शन है, वो खाना अगर उनको फीड कराया जा रहा है, and rest is that they need to have that moist place in order to grow. Rest they'll do it by themselves, because and the compost would be readily available in just in very little amount of time. That is more important. So that is why the compost is a good option. Vermicompost is a good option over the compost process. And I went through an article. Won't believe that article was really very finely. It has been mentioned, is already being uploaded on LMS. Still, if it is not there, definitely I'll share it with you people for you to have a good read. So when I was going through the article, it actually talked about, there were two articles. I've gone through both of them. One article, it talks about that, okay, what is the vermicomposting process? Why do we need to have it? What factors do we need to have? How we can put up a vermicompost unit? That was first article. Another was a very good one. It's by an Indian scientist who actually had given an option to the students in order to put up their own vermicompost unit. So it was more kind of a practical thing that, okay, we need to have to set up this kind of thing. They feed it up. They had two options. They made two groups. And in the one group, they had given different kind of food material. And another group, they have given different kind of food material. And then the worms, they were spreaded upon it. The composting process was covered, and they give some time to it in order to have the compost ready. And then they have even checked the efficacy of the compost that was ready out of different food components. So overall, that was a good idea in terms of the paper that they have presented. But on the first article, the former one has more details about the composting process. I have tried to pick up some of the features of that article, have tried to put up here, but verbally I'll be taking up the entire article. We'll be discussing it with you people. So what is actually the worming composting? It's the process by which the waste is converted into compost by the action of worms. The red worms, they are basically being used, and they have written here that they are they are kept in bins in order to feed them on food scraps, yard trimmings, yani ki wooden scrapings, and other organic matter to create compost. Article mein they have mentioned that if you just want to have quality compost, that will be entirely coming out of the uh, quality compost, that will be entirely coming out of the scrapings or that material that they have used. They actually had given a very good understanding that how the mixture it should be used up. Worms को लेके अगर worms की reproduction चाहिए तो mixture क्या होना चाहिए? That will totally an animal dung that can be used in order to have worms reproduce at a faster rate, because animal dung में उनको खाना खाने को बहुत आसानी से मिलता है. They have moist environment in that, so they replicate at a very faster rate in that. So that was very beautifully has been given. The worms, they break down the material into high quality compost called castings. Worm bins are easy to construct. It's not always the bins that we need to have. शायद पिछली बार मैंने एक डिस्कशन करी थी कि there are two kind. One is bins. We can have either bins, or in order to have the continuous process of the vermicomposting, or we can have the pit method, जहाँ पे आप worms को फिर separate करते हो, फिर उनको fresh material layer करके, then you again feed the worms on that fresh material. So that is the castings they are being produced. The worm bins are easy to construct and are also available for purchase. 1 pound of mature worms, that is 450 grams, that contains around 800 to 1000 worms, can eat up half a pound, that is around 225 grams of organic material per day. तो अगर 800 से 1000 worms हैं, तो they can eat half a pound, that is 250 grams, or approximately 225 grams of organic material per day. So it depends how much worms you need, the heap that you have created, the material that you have provided. So accordingly, you need the number of worms in order to have your work done. The bins, they can be sized to match the volume of food scraps that will be turned into castings. So bins, okay, they are talking here of one particular method that you need to have that bin. So it is always good to have it, because it will be then entirely about continuous process, but the normal process, it's not there. So that is one thing, that how much you need in order to have that work done. आज नहीं, अब बाद में आ जाना, आप 10 बजे के बाद आ जाना. So it typically takes 3 to 4 months to produce usable castings. That from the initial stage, the process it starts up, and at the end, the things they turn out in just 3-4 months of time. So composting में क्या था, यहाँ पे मैं time frame की बात करता हूँ. That at the initial stage when you start up the process, the composting process will totally depend upon the heap size that you have created. यहाँ पे वो heap का matter जो है, you actually have created a big heap. Feed more worms to it. Feed more worms so that the action can be doubled and the time can be reduced. But that process cannot be controlled because you actually cannot control the microorganism process, the microorganisms into that heap process. So that is not a very good option. So it typically takes 3 to 4 months from the start of the process in order to have those castings. The castings can be rotting soil. The other byproduct that is talked here as worm tea. मैंने पहले भी बताया था, मैंने ये word नहीं सुना, मैंने पढ़ा भी नहीं है. So they actually are talking about the leachate. Leachate means that that castings they have been prepared. Castings यहाँ पे black soil को ही बोल रहे हैं, जो humus soil जो बना दी गई है, that is the waste that is coming. That compost actually, when you mix some water, the leachate will come out. So that leachate will actually have all those nutrients, have all those qualities taken all together, and the cup would be ready for the pot. So it's very good, has been used as a liquid fertilizer, can be sprayed upon the plants. It's totally a natural process. It's totally natural, so it's organic. There will be nothing that will be coming in the chemical forms. So that makes a very good option in order to have the compost feeding up to the forms. So I've tried to put up a photo here. This is a picture that is being shown up here that shows that how the this compost, vermicompost is being getting ready up, and the worms. Rupal, you wanted to say something?
Yes.
Okay. And these worms, you can see the worms inside that compost. So ultimately, when you actually have compost ready, the worms they are separated out. एक mesh के ऊपर उनको हिलाया जाता है, worms ऊपर रह जाते हैं, compost नीचे आ जाती है, and you separate out the worms. And interestingly, you will be happy to know the fact that every time the worms number it increases by itself, the worm number. So वर्मी कंपोस्ट के साथ वर्मी कल्चर भी होता है इसमें. So we actually had the worms being culturable in the, you just need to feed them, they'll reproduce by themselves, and you have the quality of the worms as well as the compost itself. So worms, मैंने पिछली बार भी आप लोगों को बताया था पिछली क्लास में, that worms they have been called as plant nutritionists. That is a very good term that is being used up here. I read about it. Normal compost के comparison में एक तो ये they are rich in content. They are more good. The components that they have in the compost is more rich, comparatively more. The NPK number is more. The sodium, potassium, the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus content is more in comparison to the normal compost, and they have more components like iron, magnesium, copper. It's already being there. How it is coming up? It's totally coming up from the maceration of the material, the excreta that is coming out of the mucous membrane of the worms. वहाँ से जो भी excreta निकल रहा है, that is actually adding to the content. So worms they have that ability. They have that ability. They can fix up the nitrogen that is present inside it, and they can convert it into inorganic nitrogen so that it can be readily available to the plants. So that is the good plant nutrition that is being provided up by the vermicompost. So they have always been used as an encouragement of soil fertility. The worms they act as an appetizer for the plants. So plants they are always happy to have such. The reason being worms प्रॉपर एरिएशन के साथ उन होल्स को क्रिएट करते हैं, वो एक रिच ह्यूमस बनता है वहाँ पे. दैट ह्यूमस इज when mixed up into the plants will be providing up proper aeration, will be providing up nutrition to the plants, and plants they'll grow up very well. So they actually acts as appetizer to the plants and they increases their capacity to hold water. Normal compost का भी यही काम था. So they add essential nutrients of NPK in much larger quantities in comparison to the normal compost. So this makes it richer than the normal compost or the garden compost. During the course of composting, the ratio shifts in favor of nitrogen. Carbon और nitrogen की ratio जो होती है, it's need to be taken care of, but it's always good if nitrogen is on the higher side, not comparison to carbon, not comparing it to carbon, but comparing it to the normal composting process. यहाँ पे nitrogen का जो content है, वो ज़्यादा होता है. That is always good. That is always good. So it's always better and is easily being processed by the gastrointestinal tract of the worms. So here you can see in the table that how the nutrients, the nitrogen, carbon, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, zinc, copper, manganese, many other components, they are being added up. So vermicompost, see just how good it is in manganese and zinc, in copper. Again, in everything, it's always good. So carbon nitrogen ratio is coming up to be in a very good amount because of the shift towards the nitrogen. So that is always good. So see the nitrogen increase 1.9% in comparison to 1.4% in conventional compost. So this analysis by the research component has been really very good, that how and why vermicompost is really very good, has an upper hand, is easy to be produced, and you do not need to do anything. So that is always good. And you can see the numbers that are coming up that will add to the soil, will increase its fertility, will condition the soil actually. Then another very big benefit of using the vermicompost is minimization of solid waste with low toxicity and containing heavy metals. Solid waste की management, जब हम zero waste management की बात करते हैं, there comes a term solid waste management. So it becomes really very difficult in order to have the solid waste materials to be warmed up. So solid waste being warmed up means that the solid waste need to be matured first in order to have been utilized as a composting material. But worms do not need to have it. Wood scrapings, wood logs, or pieces of wood, they can be utilized by the worms. They can act upon it. So solid waste mixed with any other heavy metals. Heavy metals की contamination पूरे इंडिया में बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ चुकी है. There is a term for it, biological magnification or some other term is being used up. That heavy metals now they are very normal in the processes. It happened because of the years of continuous use of fertilizers, chemicals, and other things that were being used up. So that is not always good. And the things is that is coming out is that the heavy metals, they have contaminated the underground water, are present in soil as well. So worms, they have the tendency, they can act upon the heavy metals and can reduce the toxicity, not to a very higher content, but still they can work very better than a normal composting process. So, they have that if the content of the contaminated mixture is more, contaminated means if it is highly toxicated, is mixed up and there is number of heavy metals is much more, worm will die. They cannot feed much upon it, but still they can act upon a part of it and everything will be released back into the soil. So it's, if the worm is used as a protein rich fodder, then heavy metals will be accumulated in the food chain. So if worms, you are not worried about the worms that they'll die inside, because it's again the organic content that is being added up into the that compost, that vermicompost. But heavy metals will also leach up and will again contaminate it, because part of the heavy metals will be consumed up by the worms, but when they will die, those heavy metals will again come into the food chain. So that things they needs to be taken care of in order to have the compost. A very important part. What actually is this? वो है क्या चीज जो worms हैं, what they are actually and how they act upon the composed material, how they act upon it. So there are so many species of earthworms that are present on the planet, and particularly Eisenia fetida, it's being used up because they have been called as tiger worms, are not very much prevalent, were taken originally uh, from European nations, and they have also been called as tiger worms. They have also been called as tiger worms. And the worms, they have the ability, they have a very high tendency, high abilities in order to convert the waste material into compost. So that is why they are being as a choice in order to have the vermicompost. And Eisenia fetida, they are also known as hard workers. If you can see in the image, they appear more red in color with some yellowish tone in between, and they grow into a length of 6 to 13 centimeters. So not very big in size. That is also a good advantage. They are reddish in color with yellowish rings, making them easily to be distinguished from others. And they exude, they emit out foul smelling mucus, which is the reason for the name fetida. That means stinky. So it doesn't matter that they emit out the foul smelling substances, but it's actually very rich in organic content. It's very rich in organic matter. So smell can be controlled by any other means. So ultimately the compost, ये smell ऐसी pungent smell नहीं होती कि that is not bearable up for the workers, but otherwise it's smelly in comparison to the smell that is being generated by other earthworms. So Eisenia fetida, they have a very fast activity. They convert the material at a very faster rate in comparison to any other worms. So they actually can consume up to, so 3500 worms, they can consume up to 1 kg kitchen waste in a day. So that is, just see, 3500 worms. अगर 250-300 ग्राम एक worm ले रहा है, 250-300 yes grams, yes, is taken up, is being consumed up by कितने worms की ऊपर बात करी थी हमने, 225 grams of worms. That is around 600 to 800 worms. मल्टीप्लाई बाय 4, तो वो 250 ग्राम अगर 4 से मल्टीप्लाई करें तो 1 kg of the compost material can be ready in a very easy time, in a very little time. So that is the thing about the good quality thing about the worms, is that they act upon the waste material at a very faster rate, and the material is ready within few days. So out of the 100% source material that you have started with, the 15% is what remains as the worm compost. So 15%, so that is the good conversion rate. In case of compost, normal compost, the conversion rate is not very good. It's 1:10, but here it's more than 1:15 that is coming out. So that ways it means that जितना भी वेस्ट मटेरियल है, जितना ज़्यादा लिया गया है, उसकी कन्वर्जन जो है, एफिशिएंसी जो है इन केस ऑफ worms again is higher. So that is again an advantageous point in comparison to the normal compost. So they reproduce at a very faster rate. It's been told that within 3 weeks of time they can hatch the eggs, and eggs, they can be clearly seen. Yellow color के cocoons होते, they can be clearly seen on the compost mixture. You do not need to do anything with them. They'll hatch up, worms, they'll come out, and the mature worms will be ready within another 6 or 7 weeks. So by the end of time, the population of the worms, if everything goes very finely, if moisture is there, if temperature is being controlled, I mean the worms, they have favorable conditions, the worms, they'll double up their population by the end of the process. So that is very good thing about the worms. So they double their population in every 3 to 4 months. That is, they'll have 4 generations in year, and they'll produce 500 to 600 offspring per worms per year. So that is a good number. So with vermicompost, vermiculture would also be there. So that is a good thing. And then there is another earthworm species that is being used up, is Eudrilus eugene, is not very well commonly being used up, is also known as African night crawler, and has been used in India as well. So there is a picture. We'll share the paper with you, people, where you can see the picture of the night crawlers. So okay, then coming to that, what material do we need to have? So worms, they feed very well on animal manure, animal excreta, animal waste, and then they feed very well upon anything that is coming out of farm waste, sawdust, wood materials, wood scrapings. So they feed very well upon all those materials. So lecture में मैंने एक आपको बात बोली थी that they are the best friends of the planet Earth. They are the best friends because they keep on doing their process. मैं आपको इसका एक बहुत अच्छा example बताता हूँ where the worms, they are actively continuous doing up their process is in deciduous forest where the soil is totally being turned into black humus soil. So that is naturally being done up. वहाँ पे होता क्या है? Animals in jungles, they actually keep on laying down their excreta at different places. That excreta is coming up mixed with the soil, where the worms, they have the tendency to mix it with up, grow, reproduce there itself, and the leaves, the entire jungle leaves, they fall on the soil itself क्योंकि वहाँ पे कुछ भी कोई collection करने नहीं आता है. So the worms keep on acting upon it, so they keep on producing that black humus soil. And that is why the jungles, they keep on growing by themselves. That is totally the mother nature that helps it to rejuvenate, to keep on adding to it, and to keep the processing, to keep the cycle running on by its own. And that is why they've been called as best friends for the planet Earth. So they actually feed upon these natural sources, but the vegetable waste that is not very much prevalent in jungles is a very good content that can be provided to E. fetida. ये अगर vegetable waste that is coming out of kitchen can be fed to the worms, these worms, so they have more tendency to feed upon the nitrogen rich material. अगर ऐसा है तो किचन वेस्ट में ऑलरेडी जो वेजिटेबल के पील्स होते हैं, फ्रूट के पील्स होते हैं, वेजिटेबल रिमेन्स होते हैं, they grow very well, they feed upon it very well, and that is a good way in order to feed the worms, in order to have a better compost ready in less of the time. So feed, the quality of feed matters, but I've told you paper, wood, cardboards, anything that is coming out from such kind of material, be it tissues, that is made from paper, fiber, it needs to be there. Apart from it, the remains of the animal excreta, animal manure, if it is there, and then finally the sawdust, the wood scrapings, anything, any such material that is totally coming out of nature can be fitted up to them, and they degrade it very properly. So here in the slide, you people can see that animal excreta from cattle, horses, sheep, pigs, poultry, goats, hares and donkeys, but they have not talked about any other animal here. That is a very common reason, because there are some materials which are actually not good for the compost as well as for the worms. The reason being, worms, they'll act upon the material, that is fine, but anything, any animal excreta may contain those microorganisms which are really not good for the worms as well. And for the microorganisms, the bacteria and good fungus that will be naturally being there along with the worms working on the compost, तो वो उसको भी kill कर देंगे, मतलब नहीं grow करने देंगे. So that is not good. So they have talked about particularly these animals that need to have excreta from. Then vegetable waste, be it be hay, be it be rice husk, राइस का जो कवर होता है, वीट हस्क, उसका जो कवर होता है वीट के ग्रेन्स का, that can be used up. Grass, weeds, leaves, foliage that may be coming out from tea and coffee trees, but they need to be chopped up so that worms can feed it upon them easily. Cereals, coffee pulp, bean pods, banana and orange peelings. So all those materials, such kind of vegetable waste, can be easily being taken out from the kitchen every day. And then forest soil or ash. Ash, it provides a natural covering to the composting process. Ash अगर है उसके ऊपर, so the other rodents or any other worms or any other bacteria, they'll not come and feed upon it until and unless a layer of ash is there. Or forest soil. Soil से अगर आपने उसको cover कर दिया है, ये बहुत नॉर्मल टेंडेंसी रहती है, अगर आप इस इमेज में भी देख पाओ, दैट worms, they grow up few centimeters in between the soil, few centimeters अंदर की तरफ grow करते हैं. So That is another way, that if you cover up the soil with the, if you cover up the composting process with the soil, so that will actually will help. So the worms, they'll not be targeted by any other predators and they can continuously grow inside. So that is a good advantage. Then pre-composted kitchen waste. Pre-composted means kitchen waste that has been kept for decomposition for some time, थोड़ा सा easy हो जाता है to worms to act upon it. So that is always good. And then that compost, that waste mixture is being mixed up, that is being fed to the worms. And then fish remains, any kind of fish remains can be added to it. Seaweed, पिछली बार भी compost में मैंने बताया था that only problem of seaweed is that you just need to leach out salt. तो ज़्यादा salt pH को imbalance करेगा, not good for the microorganisms as well as the worms. So you just need to leach out the salt out of the weeds. So you just need to wash it with water. 2-3 बार treatment देके या rain water में रख दो उसको, बारिश का जब मौसम हो. So seaweeds can also be used up as a good nutrient material for the feed to for the worms to act upon. Now, keeping aside the composting methods, you just need to take care of the temperature. That is very important. Worms, they grow very well if the temperature is close to 25 to 30 degrees Celsius in countries like India. That is a very ideal conditions for them to grow. Can be a bit more, less, low or more higher, but make it sure it doesn't goes more than 30 degree or 32, 33 degrees Celsius, because worms फिर अंदर मिट्टी गर्म हो जाती है and worms they start coming out. उनको ज़्यादा moisture भी नहीं मिलता, so they'll start coming out of the soil, being targeted by the predators. So you need to create that ideal condition. How it is being practiced, we'll talk about it. Moisture is a very good friend of the worms. So when they are moist, they have the tendency to keep entering, because उनका जो leachate होता है, जो उनकी membrane को soft बनाता है, moisture helps a lot into it. So they keep on accessing the holes, digging inside, and it becomes easier for them. So humidity needs to be maintained by providing water, and then oxygen, because they'll be acting aerobically. So aerobic conditions need to be maintained. So ऑक्सीजन सप्लाई नीड्स टू बी देयर. इसका एक ही इलाज है कि जो कंपोस्ट का मिक्सचर है शुड बी सेग्रीगेटेड, शुड बी कंटिन्यूअसली मिक्स्ड अप, ताकि वो लूजन रहे, नॉट टाइटली पैक्ड अप कि उनको अंदर सांस भी ना आए. एंड पीएच, सो always pH is always good, needs to be maintained for the worms to grow up easily. So okay, here the slide that talks about the construction of the worm farm. The first stage is bedding. That is, you need to create a proper climate. You need to make the materials that they can easily feed upon the material that you have provided without going deep inside the soil. So what do you need to have? You need to have the bed being properly set up. So that bed needs to be made up of, say, wood carvings or leaves, bamboo leaves or any other leaves that are dried up. So they can be layered up just at the bed that you have formed up. So that the worms may not dig into the soil. So that will also protect them from any temperature fluctuation, will keep it cooled down at there, and guarantees a well balanced humidity and aeration. So that is always good in order to have that. The next step is providing the feed. So feed मैंने बताया था, जो दूसरा आर्टिकल है जिसमें उन्होंने they actually have used the wood pulp that is coming out and from wood carvings, वो use करे थे उन्होंने, shaved woods. Along with that they have used rice husk in one and coffee pulp in another. तो वो दो अलग मटेरियल यूज करके उन्होंने जब चेक करा, so they have seen that the good quality material was coming up in both of the processes. So feed is actually very important. So it's always good if you are mixing these stuff with animal waste, animal excreta and vegetable waste. So that will always help the worms to grow up in a very better environment. Then introducing the worms. Worms culture की form में मिलते हैं. One time purchase is always there. You need to buy them continuously. Then they'll, अगर आपका composting का process बहुत अच्छा है, they'll keep on growing by itself. They'll keep on replicating. They'll keep on multiplying. So they need to be introduced by having the culture from any वर्मी culture cells. बहुत जगहों पे अवेलेबल है, इंडिया में बहुत जगह पे है, in many universities, agriculture universities it's there, and now privatization, because entrepreneurship is totally related to this vermicomposting process. So many people, they are practicing it, providing the worms as well to the people if they want to have their own vermi culture. So you need to have those worms feed up on the top, cover, moisten the compost material, moisten करने के लिए water उस पे स्प्रे कर दें, ज़्यादा पानी भी होगा यहाँ कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा, उसका लीचेट ही निकलेगा जो अल्टीमेटली इज अ गुड थिंग, because worms they need to have good water content in the compost material. So just need to take care of that. Evaporation वहाँ पे ना ज़्यादा हो, मैंने बताया है अगर evaporation हुई, पानी moisture content कम हुआ, the worms they'll start coming out and they cannot access the holes even in order to have that. So we need to cover the compost heap in order to keep the rodents away, in order to keep any other animals away from that, and that can be done by polyethylene foil, प्लास्टिक की कोई भी शीट लेके उससे कवर करा जा सकता है, wood, bamboos. I mean, if you do not want to use plastic, you always can have natural products, so that can be used in order to cover up that process, that thing that is happening inside. And then you just need to monitor that how the waste is being, वेस्ट को मॉनिटर करना यहाँ पे एक बहुत अच्छी एक्टिविटी होती है, अच्छी इन द सेंस यू आर एक्चुअली असेसिंग द क्वालिटी ऑफ द कंपोस्ट दैट इज बीइंग जनरेटेड, नीड टू टेक केयर ऑफ इट, हाउ द प्रोसेस इज हैपनिंग. इसमें करना क्या होता है कि कुछ दिनों बाद, कुछ महीनों बाद, जस्ट नीड टू टेक आउट सम ऑफ द soil or some of the compost that is being ready, and you just check the quality कि वो powdered form में वो convert होती जा रही है. If it is happening, worms they are working very actively. If you find anything fishy, that no, the things are not going in a very fine way, and if you see a population of the worms if, is not surviving inside, then something is not good. You need to take care, aerate it properly, again feed up with the more content, with the more good content for the worms to grow up. Animal excreta उसमें ऐड कर सकते हो ताकि worms को वो natural condition मिल सके जिसमें वो बहुत अच्छे से grow करते हैं. So that can be checked in months or over the period of time in order to see if the worms they are growing in a very good condition. At last is the harvesting. Harvesting मैंने बताया था जब शुरुआत करी थी इस लेक्चर की. There are two things that I have talked about. One was the bin, the continuous system that you actually had a trays one upon the another in the bins. वो tray accessible होती हैं and you put the waste material in one bin, put the worms over the above it, and then you actually shake the tray from where the compost material it comes down, but not the worms in the second tray. फिर उसमें से और ऊपर fresh material ऐड कर दिया जाता है, worms उसमें already हैं, they'll again start the process. Then you can even have water added to it that will act as a leachate in the second tray, and in the third tray, the leachate will come out from where it can be accessed. I mean, अगर नीचे टैप लगी होती है, वो टैप से आप वो leachate निकाल लें, that can be sprayed to the plants, and the dried up material of the compost that is being ready can again be used up as a humus, rich humus soil to be fed to the plants. So harvesting इसमें एक केस में ये होती है, and then there is another way of harvesting the वर्मी कंपोस्ट. कंपोस्ट को एक slanting slope के ऊपर रख दिया जाता है, slope के ऊपर, and then the mixture that is being ready up and is kept upon it. So what happened that because of the activity of the gravity, the worms they start sliding out on it, and they'll keep on coming down towards the stuff that you have created in order to capture the worms only. So अगर आप उस मिक्सचर को थोड़ा सा हिलाते हैं तो worms नीचे की तरफ स्लाइड करते जाएंगे, and you are left with the compost material in the end separated from the worms. ये मैं उस बारे में बात कर रहा हूँ जहाँ पे आपने pit method यूज करा है, not the bin method. So with that process, the worms they can be separated out, again they can be feeded up to any other next pit में उनको डाल दो worms को, so they'll keep on continuing the process. So how naturally the things that can be managed has been beautified here. The topic that I have discussed with you people, that starting from creating the vermicompost, why it's good, what factors you need to take care of, what is the process that needs to be, okay, bedding kari, mixture dala, worms feed kare, take care of the worms, cover it up. After some time, take the compost out. At last, the stage that comes out here to be is that once the compost is ready, the compost need to be packed up in a very good way and is stored in a very proper place, ताकि वहाँ पे कोई और जानवर या कुछ और चीजें वहाँ पे ना grow कर पाएं, because that is always a good thing. The compost is always good for other worms, other bacteria, other fungus to grow up inside. So anything can grow inside. So once the humus is ready, once the this compost is ready, vermicompost, sack it up. Sack means that you pack in the बोरी जिसको बोलते हैं, sacks में उनको pack करके properly store them in a very dry place where there are nothing that can access them. Any other animals or rodents, they cannot access it. So those sacks, they can be piled up and your compost is ready to be sold off. So that is the process how an entrepreneurship can also be developed out of this activity. Plus you are helping the nature to have a revival. You are not, the input is just one time input, just one time. You need to buy the culture of the worms, that they are very cheap, and rest is they'll keep on replicating by themselves. So you can have the practice of vermicompost as well as vermiculture with this activity. So okay, I'll stop here. Then we'll talk about that, how the industries, they can be set up in order to have that process done for us. So I'll stop here. Just a 1 or 2 minute break. A 2-minute break, guys. So okay, guys.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Yuvraj.
Sir, can you please tell me the difference between the factors that are impacting the microbial activity in vermicomposting as well as how it is different from the conventional composting?
Would you repeat?
Sir, the factors we are discussing like moisture, pH.
Yuvraj, थोड़ी सी ऊंची बोलोगे?
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are audible, but you just speak a bit louder.
Oh, okay, sir. So you know the factors we have discussed, the moisture, pH, and all
हाँ
in earlier the composting method. So
हाँ
how those factors are different in this case of vermicomposting?
okay, they are not exactly different from, because pH मॉइस्चर जो भी है आपके कंटेंट से गवर्न हो रहा है कि आपने क्या कंटेंट लिया है. इफ यू हैव ड्राइड मटेरियल, ऑब्वियसली द मॉइस्चर कंटेंट वुड बी वेरी लेस. ड्राई मटेरियल मींस वुड स्क्रैपिंग्स हैं, सॉ डस्ट है, हस्क है, कुछ ऐसे मटेरियल्स हैं, दे आर ऑलरेडी ड्राई मटेरियल, ड्राई लीव्स हैं. So that is not always a good option. So that is why it's being said that how it's being different in case of vermicompost is worms, they need to have a good moisture content. Worms को वो moisture चाहिए होता है यहाँ पे. So that is why the water is being fed from outside. pH again will be governed by the content that you have taken up. वॉर्म्स के केस में पीएच बहुत ज़्यादा वेरी करे तो भी उनको इतना फर्क नहीं पड़ता है अगर द डिफरेंस इज मोर इन कंपैरिजन टू अ नॉर्मल कंपोस्ट प्रोसेस, बिकॉज अल्टीमेटली वॉर्म्स की एक्टिविटी हैम्पर नहीं होती है इतनी पीएच की वेरिएशन से, बट द एक्टिविटी ऑफ द गुड माइक्रोब्स इज अफेक्टेड. सो दैट इज व्हाट नीड्स टू बी टेकन केयर ऑफ. दैट इज द ओनली डिफरेंस. युवराज,
Okay, sir.
anybody else for the question part? Adhish, Thoiba,
Yes.
Ayushi,
Yes,
yes,
sir.
Shakti.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
So, sir, as you talked about like in deciduous forest, so can we do it artificially on in a land, and can we convert by taking care of all the factors, moisture and like shed, and then can we convert a barren land into a fertile land using this technique?
That is what I talked about in the entire lecture, that deciduous forest का शक्ति एक एग्जांपल लिया था कि नेचुरली कैसे होता है. Why the earthworms, they are called as soil scientists, or why they are called as best friend of the planet? Because they keep on doing that process in a very natural way. And everything in the class that we talked about, ये construction of worm farm जो मैंने पूरा example दिया था कि कैसे फॉर्म सेटअप करना है, दैट इज टोटली आर्टिफिशियल वे ऑफ सेटिंग अप द फॉर्म, totally artificial way of creating everything, having the worms feeding up and have the compost ready. So definitely it can be done, and that is what it has been talked about. Shakti.
So, sir, by this compost we can convert a barren land into a fertile land.
Yes, definitely. Ultimately, see, barren land, it means that there are two conditions. Once the soil is not rich enough in order to have the plants grown up there. Second is the water. That is very major problem in country like India. Water की scarcity है, that is another issue. But soil fertility, 100%, that is what it is being worked upon, that it can be improved very well, and you can have your planting material being grown up on a barren land if the soil is deficient in nutrition. Shakti.
Thank you, sir.
रूपल, नेहल, तुम में से, हाँ, नेहल ने पूछना.
Sir, I was asking, does this process have any drawbacks?
See, drawbacks, they come up when the process goes awry. Process अगर सही नहीं है तो drawbacks होते ही होते हैं. Otherwise, normally it's always pros that the technique we have talked about. जैसे हम किसी भी टेक्निक के बारे में बात करते हैं, मैं एग्जांपल के तौर पे यहाँ पे ऑटोक्लेव लेता हूँ. ऑटोक्लेव स्टेरिलाइजेशन में हेल्प करता है, बट इफ it's not operated properly can cause a blast in the lab. So in a similar way, vermicomposting process, if everything goes in a very fine way, the conditions that you have provided, the worms that are coming up, so that will be always a good option, the things that they are coming up into. But contrarily, if the things they go awry, worms सही नहीं grow कर रहे हैं, मर रहे हैं अंदर, condition अच्छी नहीं maintained है, bad bacteria they have come up, and rodents अगर वहाँ पे access कर रहे हैं, they'll kill the worms, they'll eat up the worms because that is food for them, or any other animals if they are coming up, तो वो ant eaters या कोई भी ऐसे worm eaters वहाँ पे आते हैं तो वो खा जाएंगे इनको. So that is not always a good option, but that is the con that is related to it. Otherwise, एक्टिविटी में क्या डिफरेंस होगा कि फाउल स्मेल आ रही है या कुछ ऐसा कुछ आ रहा है, that can be there, but apart from it there is nothing else.
Okay, sir.
Ishita,
Sir, I had.
Janvi, sorry.
Hello.
Yukta. Yes, Yukta.
Yes, sir.
Sir, so in composting, you talked about the byproduct which is formed as worm tea, right? So, what is its composition? I mean, how you said it is used, it is useful as a liquid fertilizer, right? So, what is it made up of that makes it suitable for that?
Okay. So the thing is that worms, ये tiger worms जिनकी आज हमने बात करी थी, they actually have in their nature, they produce some mucus substance out of their membranes. जो उनके skin cover है उससे कुछ mucus substance निकलता है, but it's always rich in organic components. मतलब उनमें already वो enriched metals, minerals या कुछ भी ऐसी चीजें हों, they are already being there. That is coming out of their skin. So you are actually taking out the worms out of it. So when you add water to it, what will happen? All those things they'll come up, will mix up in the leachate, and you can have it. So when you spray it up as a foliar spray over the plants, that will naturally act as a fertilizer. Components क्या होते हैं युक्ता इसमें? They are always the natural components. It's NPK. Apart from it, there can be manganese, copper, or any other such minerals which actually are required by the plants in micro quantities. Macronutrients नहीं है, but micronutrients हैं. So they are being provided to the plants through this warm tea जो आप बोल रहे हो युक्ता.
Okay.
Fine. विवेक, त्रिदेव, तन्वी, शिवानी, संजना, साहिबा, किसी का कोई क्वेश्चन है?
No, sir.
Yes, Vivek.
No questions as of now.
Okay. Anybody else? Fine, Tridev.
No, sir.
Athoiba, Adish, Ishita, you there? Sam, Devanshi?
No, sir, no questions.
Ishita? Ishita? Devanshi? Sam?
No questions, sir.
बोल क्यों नहीं रिप्लाई कर रहे हो? Is not still, she is not responding. Anyways, I'll stop here. If still you have any kind of queries, just let me know. We can have discussion in the next class. Is it fine for all of you? Should I stop here?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
We'll talk about more about the vermicomposting process in the next class. Then we'll finish up this module and we'll take it up to the third, which is a good module. Again, it's totally about the entrepreneurship part, the mushroom cultivation. So we'll have talk about it. Thank you guys for your time. Stay safe, stay happy.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.